So I'll explain the bandage on the nose real quick. I figure it's best to explain it and put it on the video. So it's really actually very simple. I found out a while back that I had basal cell cancer on my nose. And basal cell, from what I understand, is like the best kind to get because it's not invasive and it just kind of chills there for a long time. I guess it can get worse, but anyway, I had it removed. And in having it removed, in order to get like it done so that it doesn't have a scar, they do this like massive suture. And so I was like shocked. But anyway, so I have this huge suture on the side of my nose, and they told me to keep a bandage on it until Monday. So that's, you guys get this. So I sent a message to Scott. I'm like, Scott, are you cool with me doing a webinar with like this bandage on my face? And he's like, if you're cool, I'm cool if you're cool. I was like, sweet, let's do it. But I actually received an email a few days ago, and I've sat and thought about this email. And I really just said, you know what? I'm going to share it. I think Scott and I together could probably put in some really good insight into this. And let me share it without, let's see, I can still keep it personal here or private, but it says, let's see here. They call Scott a genius.
Well, yeah.
No, it does say geniusness. And I was like, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so they ask a question. They're going to be going on vacation, and they found that traveling can be very triggering. And let's see here. They're trying to figure out like what is safe and what isn't. And they've talked about how in this case he has sobriety, and they feel like they're making progress in recovery. They wanted suggestions on less triggering places and activities that they could enjoy. And they are spending roughly a little over a week together alone, and they want to know like outdoor activities, places that could be safe. And they actually said maybe you could do a webinar on vacationing tips, traveling together. And they're saying we like traveling. It's terrifying, but it's also very hopeful. But they would just like some instruction on that. And it really left me honestly thinking like, what exactly would I say? I've shared with people traveling tips, and I've had clients come to me. I mean, I've talked about this quite a bit. I can't say I'm necessarily, oh my gosh, this is my area of expertise, right? Like, but I've done enough work around it that I'm like, hey, I think we could have a good conversation. One of my first thoughts was this. I think sometimes, whether we are an addict in recovery or a partner in recovery, I think sometimes it's almost now I don't think this couple actually said this at all, but I think sometimes we get this idea of like almost, when do the triggers go away? Like, when is it safe to travel again? When can I get back to living my old life? And I've actually told a lot of people, like, plan on you won't, like plan on you can't, right? Like, if there are things that are triggering to you, you need to understand that they may be always triggering. And so it really becomes about what things are so triggering that that activity becomes impossible. And I think it's important to recognize, like, are there certain activities, certain things that we used to enjoy doing that now have truly become unenjoyable, that we can't go back there? It might be a certain vacation place, because there was acting out at that location. Now, sometimes I'll tell people it might be good to go back there and see if you can take the trigger out of it, like expose yourself to it, know you're going there, almost like as exposure therapy to work yourself through it, and see if you can take the trigger out and find a way to reclaim it as your space. I don't think it's good to always just avoid trigger. So I will encourage people to do that, but we might have to accept that certain things are no longer on the table. The other thing I tell people is I think it's really important to come up with, it's almost better to come up with a plan or plans than it is to try to not be triggered. So, for instance, if we enjoy going to the beach, but the beach is triggering because there's lots of people there, oftentimes there's, well, swimsuits and lots of skin and whatever else, right? Lots of things to divert the eyes. And let's say that that is triggering. Well, let's come up with some plans. How about when we go to the beach, we're going to have a conversation and check in with each other regularly. We might say, hey, let's have a place on the beach that's closer to the water, or let's only go in the water. We're going to go in the water. We're going to swim around. We're going to play, whatever. And then we're going to leave. We're not going to sit and gaze on the beach, if that makes sense. Or maybe we go to a beach that is more rocky, and so we can enjoy the beach, but you're going to get less of the swimming, if that makes sense, right? So we're going to start having conversations about what are the things that we need. Now, what I don't encourage, have a conversation, but I don't encourage, well, let's never go to the beach again, right? I would say, hey, when is there a certain time of day that, or that might be better to go than others? Or can we go to the beach and hold hands and talk the whole time? Would it be helpful if, I don't love the idea of let's stare at the ground. Let's stare at the ground, blindfold me and you guide me around, right? If you need to start with that, sure. But you're going to do a whole lot better having open conversation, discussing what is triggering for both of us. Too often I've found, let's say if in this case, a husband has been, he has broken relational agreements sexually and the beach is particularly triggering. He might be like, nope, we're never going to the beach, because he's trying to protect his spouse or partner. And I would say that's not okay. I would say I think it's important to ask, do you want to brave going to the beach, even though that might bring up some things for us? Have that conversation. You're going to do way better being open in your conversations. Otherwise, you're going to go on vacation and just ultimately be shut-ins. What's the point of going on a vacation if you're just going to be a shut-in? I don't encourage that. Get out, enjoy yourselves. But opening the conversation, what can I do for you when you get triggered? What can you do for me when we get triggered? Who are some people that you can call, that I can call? What are the tools that we have in the toolbox when we get triggered? The other thing is, I think it's important, if one of the things that's been helpful is attending a 12-step, well, then do some research before you go. What's a 12-step that I can attend? What's a 12-step you can attend? Right? Where can we get connected with like-minded recovery people? I know sometimes, and this may sound goofy, I know in Mesa, where I'm from, there is a comedy club that is all clean, right? There's no sexual jokes, and I don't think there's any alcohol served, right? And I think, if I remember right, the name is like Jesters or something like that. And so knowing like, hey, that type of an audience might be better for us. Let's go there. There's no alcohol. It's going to be non-sexual jokes, or at least not crude. There might be innuendos here and there, right? That might be helpful to not be triggering for us, right? Look for places where you might find more of a vibe that's going to work for the two of you. But a lot of times that it does take asking a local or plugging into your recovery community and asking them. But again, I'm going to go back to, let's work on not avoiding, and let's work more on our communication. What are our plans? Are we going to 10, 12 step together or separately? That sort of thing. Scott, what do you got so far as I walk through this?
Yeah, I mean, the world is full of triggers. You don't have to go on vacation to be triggered.
Right.
You know, the problem with vacations is a lot of times, as you mentioned, sometimes we've been here before, and did you act out here? I'm questioning all this stuff. The bridge rate partners will question. The other thing that happens on vacation is, yeah, there's the beach, or somebody was telling me they had gone on vacation with their wife. This was a recovering sex addict, and they were in New York, and they were having a great time, and they went down to Times Square, which is very much cleaned up from when I was an active sex addict, and it was Sodom and Gomorrah there. It's very cleaned up, but there were still people wandering around wearing nothing but body paint. and
Oh, wow.
and the guy said they're walking along, and he looked at his wife and said, well, that's hard not to notice, isn't it? I mean, you sometimes you just have to say, yep, there it is. What should I do about it? I'm going to have to look away. And this is a big thing. And this, it's the look away that triggers the wife half the time, or the betrayed partner. Oh, I see you're looking away. You must think she's super attractive. But is that forget vacation. How do you navigate that? It's like, oh, we're out to dinner. There's somebody over there that's dressed inappropriately. I have noticed. Now I'm looking away. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but now that my partner is triggered because I'm having to look away. How do we navigate that?
I will tell you, I try and encourage people, don't look away, look at your partner.
That is the best answer I've ever heard to that question.
Have you heard it before, or did I just tell you?
No, that's everybody's like, whoa, what do I do? And I never have a proper answer, and it never occurred to me, being partnerless, to just look at the partner.
Well, right. Like, and if you think about it, there are so many situations, like, if you're scared and you trust your partner or your friend or whoever you're with, you naturally just reach over and touch them. You grab their hand, right? And it's that same concept. If I'm getting triggered, it's like, I'll just look, give me eye contact. And in part, it's like, tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing, right? And tell me you can see that, like, I'm even acknowledging this is weird, this is off. I mean, the number of times that it's not even a trigger, I'll look at my wife or even a close friend or whatever, like, hey, are you hearing this? Are you seeing this? Like, are we together?
Yeah.
Right? I don't love the idea of, like, look away, look down, because the truth is we should be looking to our partner. If something's off-putting to us, we're looking at each other like, hey, are we both feeling the same thing? And so, yeah, I totally look your partner in the eye. Don't be ashamed for having a trigger. Don't be ashamed for, I mean, think about it. Being ashamed for having a trigger is like being ashamed for, smelling cinnamon rolls and, being curious. You know what I mean? Like, what I mean by that is that triggers, desires, temptations, like, all of these things are normal and natural for all of us. Let's just own it. Yeah. So then if I need a little support, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I love that answer, because that pulls us onto the same team, instead of, if I'm just trying to look away and trying to deal with it all by myself, I'm still all by myself. I'm still not connecting with you. But if I can look at you, and grab your hand and be like, okay, I'm here with you. And I like that approach a lot.
In cases of betrayal, unfortunately, too often the person who has done the betraying feels less than, The person who has felt betrayed feels often like they have to assert dominance, control. It's the wrong way of saying it, but it's basically they're afraid and they're trying to feel equal, but the person who's done the betraying often feels like, I'm not worthy to be an equal. That head down, looking at my feet, looking away. It's almost like this child role. And I always try and push, you're not a child, you're an adult, you're an equal. Like, look each other in the eyes. Right? Like, you aren't less than because you screwed up and made some mistakes that hurt your partner, right? Learn how to be an equal, but that takes time. And so, yeah, absolutely. You're feeling triggered. Look the other person in the eye.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, oh, what's going on? Well, they're going to pick up real quick. Oh, you must be triggered. Well, cool. I'm glad you're looking at me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I love even having that as part of the plan. You mentioned having a plan, like, are we going to the beach? Are we not going to the beach? If we're at the beach, how are we going to handle it? You know, if I get triggered at the beach, I'm going to grab your hand and ask you a question about anything, you know,
Right.
you know, anything, you know, just, you know, what do you want to have for lunch or
Popsicles. What kind of
yeah,
popsicle would you eat right
yeah,
now if you could eat
yeah.
any popsicle? It's
There we
like,
go.
can we
Popsicle
just
sounds
get
good.
talking about something else?
You must want some dessert right now. We've had cinnamon roll and popsicle here. Like, so yeah,
I
but I
will.
love that, having a plan. And you know, it's a vacation. You go on a vacation together, and you know, like I said, the world is full of triggers. Let's be adults and be like, okay, well, there's a not enough bikini over there.
Right.
I think I'm just going to look at you and converse with you because I
Uh,
don't want to, you know, stare at the not enough bikini over there.
right. Um,
So
the other thing is sometimes a lack of engagement is where triggers come from as well. And so I've encouraged, like, one thing couples could easily do, or anybody for that matter, right? Whether you're in a relationship or not, there are little, I call them games. Like, there's a game called we're not really strangers, but there's other ones like that where they have a list of questions you can ask each other. And I think even just having a small number of those cards in your pocket when you go out to dinner, and it's like, man, we're not engaged. Here, I'm going to read one of these cards that has a question on it that we can ask each other and have a conversation about. All right, next card. And it's literally just having a plan for engagement, because when the brain isn't engaged, it's just too easy to be triggered by anything.
yeah. So now let me ask you one more question, then we'll jump into the Q&A because we got a bunch of them already. Let's say we're walking down the street and wherever we are on vacation, you know, we went to Savannah or something, and we're on our way to the nice restaurant. And I see somebody who's highly triggering to me, whether my partner notices or not. Should I say that I'm triggered and here's what I'm doing about it? Should I say, wow, honey, I'm triggered right now. Can I engage with you, or should I just try to engage? I mean,
That's a good question. I think that that's a conversation for each couple, meaning there are times where I've had one partner say, it's best if you tell me what your triggers are after we're out of the situation. So engage me, but later on, give me the details of the trigger. Otherwise, I'm now engaged in your trigger instead of engaging with you. And so I think it's really important for the couple to have that conversation. If I'm triggered and I tell you, hey, I'm triggered, can you engage with me? Or would it be best that I engage and then I tell you, hey, by the way, in this scenario, I was triggered. Can I walk through what triggered me? If that makes sense.
yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, again, have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times couples are just like, okay, let's go on vacation and we'll white knuckle it, and there's no plan.
And I will tell you one, like I'm thinking of one couple in particular that I've had that over the years, they, like, let's just say in this case, the wife had been told by therapists, like, don't get into the details of your spouse's trigger. And what was really interesting is that I think in general, that rule can be helpful for people, but I've found that you really need to figure out what are the needs of the couple, because in this case, I've ultimately said, if you need all those details and it's truly calming you down, well, then ask away, talk away, right? But we also need to figure out, is that actually making it worse for your partner? Yeah, it might bring up some shame for your partner, but we can work through shame. But too often we get these rigid rules, which I think can be helpful in a lot of cases. But the truth is, each one of us is different. One spouse could really be calmed by getting a ton of detail about the trigger because it gives them insight into their spouse. And another spouse says, don't give me too many details, I'm now triggered, right? We have to figure out what actually works for us. And I've had, let's say, a husband who has some sexual compulsivity might be like, nope, my therapist told me I'm not allowed to share with you the details. And it's like, no, stop. Figure out what your spouse actually needs, right? If your spouse actually needs more detail, then let's talk about it. Let's find out why. What about those details are helpful? Does it actually calm you down for me to give you all the details? Well, then let's have a conversation. So be careful on the rigidity there. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, I think it does. Okay, let's jump into the Q&A here. My husband has a very outgoing personality. He's always talking and joking around with people. It doesn't matter if they're man or woman, young or old. He really enjoys being the center of attention. This was never an issue in our marriage until discovery of his many, many emotional affairs over the years. And now I find this behavior very triggering. I'm struggling to discern, is this behavior risky and something he needs to work on in his recovery? Or is this just my betrayal trauma talking and something that I need to work on getting past in my own healing? This is a great question.
Oh, it's an amazing question. And here's the answer. It's probably both, right? Like, as I'm sitting there listening to this question, I'm going, my guess is this incredible skill of talking and joking around and connecting with people. And I love that you recognize man, woman, young, old, it doesn't really matter. He loves that connection. You call it the center of attention. And it really, somebody like that, like, I don't know, my brain immediately thinks of like Robin Williams, who just had the ability to like pull people in and like connect with them and be a center of attention, but at the same time, like, could that be a good or bad thing? Well, in the case of your spouse, my guess is your husband probably used that in his acting out, and it drew people in that they felt, oh gosh, there's a word I want to use. They felt pulled, they felt drawn to him, and then they felt attracted to him, not even like sexually or romantically, but we are attracted to people like that. And that's a gift that that person has. But I almost guarantee you that gift was used for nefarious purposes. And so the truth is, it doesn't surprise me that you find it triggering, because that gift was probably used in an unhealthy way. Now, for your question, is it just your betrayal trauma talking? No, I don't think it's just your betrayal trauma talking. However, it probably is something you need to work on. like meaning you and him probably need to have a lot more conversations around, like, how often did you use this? And did you, was it a conscious thing that you used to pull in? I'm trying to remember the many emotional affairs. Was this conscious? Because I see you doing it with men and others, and so like you're doing it with other people. Did it, you just pull people in accidentally and then that's how things sparked up? Well, let's talk about what population you need to be careful with in using this gift. Or maybe he even works on, look, when it's that population only, I have to be careful. Like, I know that for me personally,
I think he froze. Not sure if that's Matt froze or I froze. Uh, somebody pop in the Q&A,
Don't-
whether it's, oh, there you are, you're back.
Oh,
We lost
shoot.
you for a second. I think we lost you, although maybe you lost me.
No, you totally could have lost me, but meaning I can go hang out with a guy friend one-on-one for lunch and it not be a problem. If I start hanging out with females one-on-one for lunch, like, even though it may not feel like a problem, it's really not a smart thing for me to do personally. Right. And so it's like, look, so we've got to try and figure out, like, when is this gift that he's using susceptible and when is it not? And so I don't think he has to change that part of his personality, but I don't think it's just you getting past it either. I think it's a combination of the two of you understanding and knowing each other well enough to figure out how to create safety for each other, and being, and he needs to probably become more aware to say to you, hey, I realize that I'm probably being a little too friendly there. That's where it would become flirtation for me.
Yeah,
So
what I always tell the addicts, and I mostly work with addicts and males, is, whether your wife is with you or not, you got to ask yourself, would she be uncomfortable? Because they're like, I'm just friendly. I'm like, yeah, you are friendly, but you've also used that friendliness to act out. So, you need to put, the little angel on your shoulder, the wife, and kick the devil off, and listen to the little angel on your shoulder saying, I'm uncomfortable right now. Stop, please.
I remember you one time, you called out a friend of yours in a
Oh yeah.
restaurant.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is like, I'm like, does your wife think this behavior is flirting? Oh, well, yeah. I'm like, because it is.
Well, right.
He just had trouble wrapping his head around it.
And it may be like, well, no, like, because I've found that when I'm really nice to the waitress, she gives us better service. And it's like, well, yeah, that might be true, but I mean, you've got to be careful, because that means straight up be flirting.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, whether it's flirting or not, if it would make your wife uncomfortable, if you love your wife, stop it. I mean, but yeah, my friend that I called out, he never did it with the male waiters. He only did it with female waiters. So it was pretty obvious. But this is a super outgoing guy.
Yeah.
Cool. That's great. That's a wonderful personality trait, but it can be used as part of the addiction. And that's what he has to be aware of. So that's just speaking to him. You got to know whether it would make your wife uncomfortable or not. And if it would, you shouldn't be doing it. Pretty straightforward. But that's such a good question, and so much awareness in asking it. So very cool.
Oh yeah. And it's honestly, this is a question I think a lot of people ask, and maybe not even, it's not asked enough. But I think it leaves you both in a really uncomfortable place while you try to navigate and figure out, what is life post discovery going to look like, and how do we adapt and work through our different temperaments and everything else. Because I think it's messy.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump to the next one here. Do you recommend a period of abstinence for a recovering couple? We are a week out from a devastating D-Day. We are committed to recovery and really need help and guidance through this.
I'm going to assume that that's a sexual abstinence.
I'm guessing, yes.
And I love that this question is asked, because the answer is not simple. The answer is, it depends on the couple. It depends on perhaps even the level of acting out. I will say that Patrick Carnes does recommend a 90-day abstinence. But in my clinical experience, I've found that it really depends on the couple. If you guys are able to sexually connect and it's strengthening your relationship and it's connected sex, like, I don't know any other way to say that, then I don't know that you need to be abstinent. In fact, I've been more of the opinion that any sex, that's too strong, but most sex between two committed partners is going to be healthy for the recovering addict, sexual addict, because it's sex with another like real person that they have a relationship with, not a fair partner or a virtual partner, a fantasy partner, if that makes any sense. But at the same time, don't have sex if you're not comfortable with it. Like, don't have sex to try and help your sex addict partner to heal. Like, don't have sex unless you're comfortable and ready. Now, at the same time, there may be times you're not always comfortable and ready, and you have to ask yourself, do I need to push through a little discomfort? But like, there's a quote by, I think, Emily Nagoski, where she says it's not dysfunctional to not want to have sex that you do not like. Essentially, it's not dysfunctional for not wanting to have sex because you don't like it. You're not liking the kind of sex you're having with each other. And so if you need a period of abstinence, then I think that's okay. If he needs a period of abstinence, and I don't know that I say he, if whoever you're married to needs a period of abstinence, that's fine. If you both need a period of abstinence, if that's going to help you heal, absolutely. Now, the longest period of abstinence that I've heard talked about is 90 days. And the idea there, and I think there is some research there, the idea there is if you can maintain abstinence. Now, keep in mind, abstinence isn't just acting on sex, it's trying to be mentally abstinent as well. If you're going around fantasizing and you're not working on controlling your thoughts and that sort of thing, then are you being abstinent, right? There's some question there, but the idea is after 90 days, you reset the chemicals in your brain to baseline. Now, is that perfectly true? Is that the case for everybody? What exactly does that look like? I don't know, but the idea is that withdrawal isn't going to be as strong after 90 days. And that there is some level of baseline, but I wouldn't push abstinence as a partner to try and manage the addiction, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say we have to do this. I would say you got to check in with yourself and ask yourself, what do I need? What do you need? What would be best for us? What's going to help us have the best healing? And I would explore that together. And so do I recommend it? Yeah, when it's helpful. If it's not something you're needing, or your addicted partner is needing, then no. How do you know? We don't know. Try it, if that makes any sense, or don't try it and see how it goes. Scott, is this way too vague?
Well, I mean, I typically, and I'll just speak for myself, will recommend to addicts, you probably need to step away from all sex for 30 days, including sex with self, to clear your head, because most sex addicts, it's a jumble. They don't know what's healthy. They don't know what's not healthy. They're so filled with denial. Sometimes a period of complete abstinence, including sex with self, can help them clear their head, come up with a sobriety plan. And usually I find betrayed partners aren't too keen on having sex, like for a little while anyway, but not always.
You say that, but there are some betrayed partners who almost become hyper aroused, right? Like, because it's like, oh my gosh, I need to be sexual with you so that I can keep you.
So I can feel connected, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but the reality of it is that's why everybody's different. And
the one thing I think none of us want betrayed partners doing is saying, I'm going to have sex with you because if I have lots and lots of sex with you, you'll stop having sex with prostitutes or massage. That's not probably a good use of your sexual energy.
Correct. Because now you're ultimately managing their sexual being through you, but that's not actually ultimately healthy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. But loving connected sex, I'm always a fan of that. All right. Next one here. I'm a sex, love, and porn addict in recovery. I did my formal disclosure to my wife 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, my wife disclosed to me that she had an emotional and sexual affair. Now we are both dealing with betrayal trauma. How do we best manage our triggers, particularly when both of us are triggered at the same time? It can be very difficult to show up for each other.
Yeah. Wow. Um, Gosh, you both did disclosure. First of all, I want to honor that that's actually beautiful. Beautiful that you both are essentially saying to each other, I'm willing to come clean because I want to work on the relationship, and I don't want to have this relationship with um any barriers holding us back. And so, like, what an amazing thing that you both are disclosing and coming forward with each other. um how do we best manage our triggers? Well, I'm going to go one of my big things is make sure that you each have your support system in place. And in some sense probably a somewhat separate support system. And you can have overlap, but like, you need your people, she needs her people, and then you need our people. And so I think having people that you can reach out to, connect with, call, and let them know, hey, I'm triggered. You can basically reach to other people and get regulated. You can then come back to each other and have a conversation about that. Here's what was triggering me. Here's what's coming up. When you're both triggered at the same time, you probably need to be discussing plans. Do we need to separate for a few minutes, for half a day? Do I need to go on a walk and you do the, what things can we do? Can we go on a walk together? Can we get outside? What things can we do? So you want to have a conversation when those triggers come up, again, trying to figure out some plans. It is absolutely difficult to show up for each other when you're triggered. Like, I would say it's 9 to impossible if you're both in pain. You could try saying, hey, I have a plan. We're just going to sit and hold hands and sit on the couch. We're not going to talk. We're going to just sit, hold hands, sit on the couch. And we're going to do that for 30 minutes or whatever. Right. And I would just try some different things. But yeah, it's a tough spot for sure. But I love that you both are getting vulnerable with each other and committing to work on the relationship. I think it's awesome.
Okay, next one here. Wife of a porn addict working on boundaries. Why does this make me so angry? Porn addict husband is doing all the right things, but I am having to revisit our past and do healing work that seems to make me feel worse. I was hopeful, but processing my anger is making me feel less hopeful. What is wrong? What can I do to help myself? Some background. We're 6 months in, I assume, into porn addiction recovery, married for 28 years. I always felt there was a porn problem. In addition, the husband had an emotional affair 13 years ago that the betrayed partner was not allowed to process, or I'm not sure what not allowed means there, but.
Well, yeah. So let's sit with why does this make me so angry? Well, there's a certain level of anger that's healthy, because anger is an emotion that says what was done to me was wrong. There was injustice. There was abuse of, like whether there was abuse or not, however you identify it. What I'm trying to say is that something is wrong here, and that anger can help us to have confidence, to stand up for ourselves, to fight for things to be made right, if you will. And what I'm looking for when I'm working with a client is, does it escalate and not de-escalate? If it's not de-escalating, then you might need to work more on grounding techniques. You might need to work on regulation techniques. There are certain clients where I will say going back and revisiting all the trauma actually may not be helpful. There are certain cases where I will say, ditch the trauma work. It's not working for you, and just focus on DBT therapy, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's all focused on emotional regulation and emotional grounding. because you may be having a regulation issue. I'm going to assume that's not the case. I'm going to assume here that you're just angry because you're finally giving yourself permission to feel all of this, or you're in a way getting permission to feel all of this. You're angry because you've had 28 years of pent up hurt and pain and lying and deception, and you're only 6 months in. I would say anger would be a very healthy emotion right now. It's not okay to rage. It's not okay to beat up on yourself or beat up on him. It's not okay to displace that anger onto somebody who doesn't deserve it. But it is okay to feel the anger and recognize that that's 28 years worth of anger, including 13 years previously from an emotional affair that you weren't allowed to process. I mean, anger seems pretty reasonable here. Now, again, how you dealing with the anger? If you're breaking stuff, if you're screaming and yelling, if you're throwing things, if you're threatening, these aren't okay, not good behaviors. And you might want to just focus on emotional regulation and grounding work. Your therapist should know what that looks like and be able to help you. And even like, I'm not trained in DBT, but there's times where I've sent clients to a therapist who's trained in DBT, if that's really what you need to get regulated. But to me, I'm looking at this going, it makes you so angry because there's a lot of injustice and pain. You have every right to feel the anger. But again, if it's too much, you probably need to focus on some different tools. Or if it's you just saying, but I'm uncomfortable and I've never been allowed to feel anger, and my family always taught me that anger is bad, well, then it's probably not too much. You need to learn how healthy anger can be, and then healthy ways to process that anger.
Yeah. And I will add that anytime there's trauma and injustice, which, you know, with any kind of betrayal there's also, we have to sort of grieve. There's a loss. Everybody thinks grief is like somebody has to die before you grieve. And that's not it at all. I mean, addicts need to grieve the loss of their addiction when they get sober. Betrayed partners need to grieve the loss of the relationship they thought they had or that they fought for, and realize, you know, and stages of grief here: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I'm hearing both anger and depression. I mean, you know, feeling less hopeful, and grief is not a linear thing. We don't go denial, anger, bargaining, you know, we bounce back and forth. We can be in more than one stage at the same time. Matt, do you think any kind of grief work or just awareness, like, oh, I might be grieving a loss here?
Yeah, and anger is one of the stages of grief, right? And so I think absolutely the anger might be, I'm unwilling to accept that there are some losses here that I'm never going to get back. You totally could be nailing it, that I'm unwilling to accept the disappointment or the sadness, right? That's where anger might be covering up a more vulnerable emotion like sadness or hurt. And so I'm staying angry because it prevents me from having to get vulnerable. So no, I totally think you could be hitting it in a great spot there.
Speaking of stages of grief, next question. I think I'm in the bargaining stage of grief. I wanted the relationship I thought I had. After discovery, I know I don't want to be the one that was with the secrets of love. After discovery, I know I don't want the relationship that was filled with secrets and lies. Recovery, as much as it sounds hopeful, still sounds burdensome compared to not needing recovery because of addiction. I just want what I thought I actually had. This mental gymnastics is making me crazy. What should I do with my therapist to work through this? I love my partner, but I feel uncertain about the future. Wow, this is just like bingo.
Oh, it's nailing it. You know, boy, how do I say this? I do a lot of grief work with people. I mean, I would argue nearly everybody that comes into my office is doing some sort of grief work, really, because I think so much of the pain is around, oh my gosh, what I was expecting, the outcome I wanted, the outcome I was hoping for, this is a sham. right? Like, I think we have to come to terms with what's the relationship I have.
Yeah.
And when you've got something in there with sexual betrayal or betrayal from substance abuse or whatever else, like, there's so much work that has to be done. And I know people who they've ultimately ended the relationship because they're like, no, I want to go find the relationship I wanted. And hey, if you feel like you can do that and that's what you need to have peace, then go for it. But at the same time, a lot of people, it's like, well, we've been together this long, we've had this many kids, like, you're not going to go get the relationship you wanted because now you have a divorce and kids, and it's a different type of relationship, and it still may be what you want or need, but a lot of times that's why I encourage people, stick with what you're in for about a year at least. That way you don't make a life-changing decision that you can't go back on. And so yes, your mental gymnastics would be making you and anybody else crazy. What should you do with your therapist to work through this? I think you're going to need to probably do something along the lines of, this is the fantasy that I was looking for. This is the reality of what I've actually got. And like, what things do I need to surrender? What things do I need to grieve? Because I'm never getting what it is that I was looking for. And so you might need to do, sometimes I've had people do literally, it's called like your fantasy partner letter. Like, this is really what I'd always been hoping for. And I think that helps to grieve. I think acknowledging anytime that that emotion comes up of loss, of longing, of what you wanted, journal it, write it down, share it with some friends. But you better believe that recovery is burdensome. Absolutely, it's burdensome. And I don't know that, but I'll tell you, I think honesty and openness in any relationship is burdensome. It takes effort. And I think any relationship you're going to get into, there's going to be a higher level of effort required than you're wanting to give. Any good relationship takes more effort and is more burdensome than you realize. I think most of us fantasize about an unburdensome relationship that doesn't require effort, and good, healthy relationships require more effort and energy than I think we fantasize about.
Yeah. And I'll just add, the end stage of grief is what we call acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, acceptance is, I accept what's real. I accept that I'm an addict. Okay, now what am I going to do about it to live the best life I could possibly live? And that's where, okay, my relationship isn't and never was what I thought it was or wanted it to be. Okay, I can accept that, but I still love my partner. We have a house, we have children, we have a life. We have, I don't want to end the relationship. Now what? Okay, well, now what is, I have to do some work. He has to do some work. We have to do some work. But the good news is, whatever we have moving forward will not be this fantasy that Matt was talking. It will be real, and reality can be a lot better than the fantasy that's not even really happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I actually, you say the end stage of grief, and I don't know that it's always the end. I think sometimes we can slip back, but
oh yeah,
the
absolutely.
end stage of grief is acceptance. And I think I love the term, it's surrender, and it's surrender all that you cannot control, right? This is where the Buddhist in me is just like, that ability to surrender, that these are all things I couldn't control. How do I accept and surrender? But that is not easy. We do not like to surrender, especially in our Western culture.
Yeah, we're taught to not surrender.
Uh-huh.
Especially men, we're taught to not surrender, but I think all of us are.
Totally.
And the serenity prayer is a beautiful thing. It's very Buddhist, and God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and I always add, provided it's your will that they be changed by me right here, right now, and the wisdom to know the difference, because Just because I can change something doesn't mean I should. And
Oh,
I need to
totally.
remind myself that I am not in charge of the world. So, but
Totally.
yeah, but accepting what I can't change is the key to all of it. So it doesn't make it any nicer for betrayed partners. I mean, here you are, you're in a crisis that is not of your own making. It's like, you're driving down the street and somebody T-bones you, and now you're in the hospital and you gotta, deal with the broken leg and three broken, not your fault. It stinks.
And you have to accept that it is what it is, and you're going to have to recover regardless of, like, here's the funny thing, you're going to have to recover from this betrayal whether you stay in the relationship or not, right? Your burden in recovery is solidified. Now, you don't have to accept the burden of recovery as a couple moving forward. You have the right not to, but at the same time, recovery and its burden is already in your life.
Yeah. I'm going to skip ahead a couple questions here. I recently realized that fantasy played a larger part for my husband than I thought. How do you know if you're a fantasy addict? And I'll just quickly say, if you're a sex addict, you're a fantasy addict. Sex and porn addiction are fantasy addictions. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess it depends, like, because you could, I mean, there are ways that you could, compulsively masturbate, but not necessarily be fantasizing. At the same time, I think it's probably pretty rare that you don't, but it's possible. How do you know if you're a fantasy addict? I think really what I would go to is, how much do I use escapism in my life? How much am I daydreaming? How much am I, and I don't know that I would even use the term fantasy addict. How much am I trying to escape my reality instead of being present? The truth is, all of us benefit from living in the present. And so I encourage everybody, whether you're an addict or not, learn to get present, learn to be grounded, learn to focus on the moment. And that, I mean, when I talk about the Buddhist in me, right, there's so much in Buddhism that's like, live in the now, live in the present. I think on my website, I even have a Kung Fu Panda quote by Master Oogway, where he basically says, it's all about living in the present, if you want to look it up, but and the present is a gift. And so I think it's really important. I don't know how we would identify necessarily the fantasy addict, other than, are they living in the past? Are they living in the future? Are they living in some sort of non-reality? Well, then it's a problem. And so we need to bring them to the present, learn to have relationships in the present. That's where I would focus. Yeah. I want to jump back up to a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You said, so there was one that said, we will be on vacation with adult kids. Any tips? I'm thinking stay somewhat in recovery, calls, dailies, etc. And I'm going to tell you, vacation, there will never be a time in your life where you don't stay in recovery. If you go on vacation and you stop doing your dailies and you stop doing the things that work for you, or you don't create dailies that work for you while you're on vacation, you won't stay in recovery. Do not go on recovery and get out of your routine. If not, worst case, or I shouldn't say best case, even if you're on vacation, if you have to develop a different routine, a routine that is specific to vacations, you must do it in order to stay in recovery. Otherwise, your triggers are going to go up. Your temptations are going to go up. Your chance of acting out is going to go up. If we get out of our routine, we increase the triggers, the chance of slipping. And so absolutely stay in recovery. If you've got to alter it a little bit because of a vacation, go for it. But talk about it and make a plan. Don't just go on a vacation expecting your addiction or your betrayal not to follow you. It will follow you, whether you want to or not.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean,
And then I'll hit this last one if you want.
Okay, yeah. Rob says don't have sex with somebody you don't trust. We've had five relapses. It's very hard to restore trust. Thoughts.
And it's interesting because earlier it's like, do you recommend sobriety or abstinence, sexual abstinence for a certain period of time? Again, I totally do. If you don't trust your partner enough to have sex, then don't have sex. If you have enough trust to have sex, but you're still struggling with trust in other areas and you feel comfortable having sex, then have sex. Like, there's nothing wrong with having sex if you feel like you're in a place where you can do that. Now, I've had some clients say, well, I want to have sex, but I don't know if he's in a good place to do it. That's not yours to judge. You can ask the question, are you in a place to have sex where you feel like it can be a connected experience between the two of us? Well, if in that case he says yes, then I would encourage you, trust it and see what happens. If you have sex and afterwards you're like, man, that didn't feel good. Okay, why? And you might decide, you know what, maybe I'm not going to have sex the next time because that didn't feel good. I need something to be different. Well, then work on that, whatever that is that needs to be different. But I'm not going to disagree. Don't have sex with somebody. Let me change it slightly. Don't have sex with somebody you don't trust having sex with, right? I may not trust my partner with them dealing with the finances at the moment, but I can trust having sex with them. I may not trust my partner that they're going to be home on time, but I can trust having sex with them. Like, don't have sex with somebody who you don't trust having sex with. I think the idea that don't have sex with somebody who you don't have any doubt of trust or any little bit of lack of trust, I don't know that I agree with that. Like, if you trust them enough to have sex, then have sex. If you don't trust them enough to have sex, don't have sex.
Yeah, it almost goes back to the Emily Nagoski quote, which, if you're not into it, don't, basically.
Yeah.
And if you are, okay, go ahead.
And you're not dysfunctional for not being into it.
Yeah.
If you need to figure out how to get into it, then let's figure out how to have more trust. Let's figure out what type of trust helps you get into it.
Yeah.
So these are really good. Lots of good questions today.
Yeah, great questions today. Great topic today, actually, especially with the summer cranking up. Happy 4th of July to everyone, by the way. And anything you want to say to take us out, Matt?
No, I enjoyed this today, and I appreciated the email that gave me a tip on what to talk on. I hope it helped. And honestly, you guys, try to lean in and get vulnerable with each other. You're not going to build a relationship without vulnerability, but don't give vulnerability that doesn't feel right. And that includes sexual vulnerability. So trust your gut and also push yourself just a little to see if you can build trust. But yeah, I think you guys are going in the right direction. This feels good.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks, Matt. We'll see the rest of you in 2 weeks as well, we hope. Have a great day. And
bye.